Beaty, and here we are in my studio. It's called the Mill Studio Building, which is in Manayunk, which is northwest of Philadelphia, about 5 miles away. And I am an interdisciplinary artist, painter and sculptor, and I currently am focusing on installation work. As you can see, this large piece of sculptures next to me, it's one of my installations going into a solo show. So the way this whole creative journey for me started, after college I was home raising my family, and I decided to go to school for architecture, believe it or not. I took a history of architecture course, and I fell in love with the idea of architecture and signed up for an associate degree in architecture and interior design. And at that time, I was a traditional conservative person. I had done some art in college, but I never pursued it because back then we were told, your college degree, you need to get a job from that. And knowing that as an artist, I probably wouldn't make much money. So I thought, well, maybe I'll make some money if I become an architect. So I took all these courses, and I had this mentor, his name is Professor John Michael, and his wife, who took me under their wing and literally taught me how to see. And I say that slowly because it sounds simple, but it was the profound thing that helped me slow down and see things differently and start to see beauty in simple objects, and also to develop a true appreciation for simplicity. And then I pursued that even further, and I came to the end of the course and I was ready to take my final exam, and my professor, very honest, said to me, Francis, you really should not bother with the architecture degree. Your ideas are too out there. You'll never get a job as an architect. You should be an artist. So I didn't take the exam. Fast forward about a year later, I made some work. I decided to find things that I could make easily around the house, and I had a solo show. And Professor John and his wife Gwen came to the show, where I had on display found objects like rusty metal and things. And this is where it was a turning point for me. When he came to the show, first of all, that's like for me having Michelangelo come to see your work. So for me that was a turning point. I was honored. But not only that, he decided he wanted to buy one of my pieces. So I didn't even have the work priced, but he was, no, I'm going to buy this piece, and I know where exactly it's going to go. We're going to put it in my living room, and I was so honored. Well, I'll say 30 years later, he just died 4 years ago, I found out that that piece that he found and bought from me was still hanging in his living room. And I thought, oh my God, what an honor. I mean, this man was an accomplished architect. He made furniture for the Frank Lloyd Wright Museum. So for me, I felt blessed. So that was a turning point. But the funny thing was, at the celebration of life for him, his daughter got up and spoke and said that she was going through the home, and there was this interesting artwork on the wall in the living room, and she didn't know who the artist was. So there it was. I'm at this memorial for him, and I said, I raised my hand and I described it, and she said, oh, so you're the artist. So that was a turning point, because the fact that it stood the test of time in his home made the connection, and she also now has it in her permanent collection to keep. So that's a major turning point for me. Alongside of that, in terms of gratification, and also why did I start to make what I make? All this stuff with metal and things. I used to work in the building trades, so I always was around wood and screening and all kinds of commercial supplies. So to me, those are like old friends. If you were around that all the time, but because I had that training from them to look at things differently, I was always looking at netting and PVC pipe and plumbing parts and trying to see how they could have a new life. So looking to give a new life to odd materials. So another thing that was very meaningful for me was having a studio and finally saying, now I have a studio, okay, and I'm going to paint in this studio, and it's a hot summer day, I'm on the 3rd floor of my studio in a warehouse building, and it's literally too hot for me to paint. And now I'm thinking, what am I going to do? There's no air conditioning, what am I going to do? And I had gathered some junk metal and some screening, and so from that experience, not being able to paint, it forced me to work with the other materials, this junk metal, and to really focus on it. And so that's why I started working with screening. And from that, I made this whole body of work, which I called primordia. They were these bubbles made out of window screening. And I thought, okay, now not only do I not have air conditioning, and I've complained to the management and said, it's supposed to be air conditioned, what are you going to make me, how are you going to make me happy? And he said, well, we'll give you a free studio for a month so you could have a show. So this to me was lucky. I said, great. So these things that I made out of screening, I called them primordia. I filled an entire studio about the size of my studio now and hung them and painted the studio, transformed the whole studio so you didn't know it was a studio with these hanging abstract pieces. They were just in the gray color, but I covered the walls of the studio, the floor, and the whole thing became a white box. So this was my very first installation where I was able to transform a space and install work the way I wanted, created the work, and I had people come and could walk among it. And when I did that, that's when I knew this is the way I wanted to communicate with people and have them interact with the art, be able to touch it. And to this day, that was the turning point, because people would come up to me, even after I moved away from, that was in Allentown, and said, oh, I love that piece, when we could come in and walk on it. And I played ambient music. People laid on the floor and fell asleep inside the installation. So that was one of those major turning points for me. So making me feel like I was going in the right direction, because people today still say to me, oh, I'll never forgot that. So if I can make an impression on somebody and transform a space, I'm a happy camper. So people always ask me, why do you do this? And what inspires you? Because everything you do is so different. They're unusual. And I said, well, that happens to be because I find these unusual objects. Now this sculpture that right here, this is a particularly important one in my life, because this is the elements that were in the pieces that my professor purchased from me. And I'm going to, full disclosure, this is baseboard heating element, found copper wire, and then I have cement on here. And I just finagled it. The way my process is, I take a bunch of things and see if I can make it something that has some form, has some movement, has a focal point, all these things that my teachers told me to look for. Much like other works over on the table in my studio, if you were to, when you look at the works, you'll see they're all have an organic feeling, where I want it to look like I actually manipulated it with my hands. My work is not machine perfect. It's meant to look like it was made by a human hand, folded, bent, and it's also meant to look imperfect, because again, I'm trying to embrace the idea of imperfection. That's an ancient Japanese philosophy called wabi-sabi, and that's really the essence of my work. If any, for me, imperfection is totally acceptable. As a matter of fact, it's how I maintain my humanity with my work. So my process, a lot of these pieces are organic looking, and nature, walks in nature is a big part of my process. Every day I try to spend at least an hour in nature, because I know that's what helps me feel grounded and staying in touch with nature. And that's pretty much my process. But in terms of the materials I use, they're all from Home Depot, they're found from the curb, they're found all kinds of places, even out of the dumpster. I just created work in Japan using cardboard netting that I found in the dumpster, and I toted that work to Japan on a residency and challenged myself to make that imperfect cardboard netting really look like something and have a form, and also to get the Japanese to understand my point of view. And that's the whole idea, and to create that wow factor, using as many odd materials and giving them a new life and a new form. In terms of what am I trying to, what's my purpose in making these pieces that look so organic and imperfect? And I know that when people look at something, my goal is to create a dialogue with the piece, much like this silver piece behind me. I know that when someone would go up to it, hopefully it'll give them a time to pause and reflect, and for them to have the opportunity to have a personal one-on-one connection with something that they look at. And it's not that I'm telling them that something shiny is important. It's more getting them to go inside their brain to a location where they normally would not go, and forcing them to think differently, because I had to think differently to create this. So every piece is meant to have some kind of dialogue where the viewer is saying, it raises questions in the viewer, so maybe they will introspectively think about themselves. What is she trying to say here? And if they don't come away with anything, that's okay. But getting someone to actually think about it introspectively is why I try to have a dialogue going on. And I want them to understand how simple materials can act for me. The materials should pique their curiosity, because I'm curious to see what the material is going to do, and I'm hoping the viewer feels that same curiosity to explore what they're looking at. And it's really just something I'm putting out there for them to take. That's what's intended. Like I just said to you, egg cartons to me have this feeling of snowmen. I don't understand what that's about. But then I go, well, look, I make these beings or these elements. So it's this humanity thing. It's our human connection. I'm trying to keep the human connection happening by creating work that people connect with each other.
So Francis, I want to thank you for your time. It was very informative and most appreciated. So again, thank you, and
we'll see you at the City Arts.
We'll see you at the
Yes,
City
you
Arts
will.
Salon.
Yes, you will. And I thank you, because you've been such a wonderful supporter, and I love an opportunity to try to share some thoughts and hope that people look at things differently, and also the beauty in simple objects. And that would make me, that's the most gratifying thing to me, if people start seeing things differently. That's where I get my biggest gratification. Thank you, Kenny.